Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to probably the last presentation you're going to see today. Does anybody else have another plan for another presentation today? All right, we got you last. We're going to save the best for last, hopefully. Thanks a lot for coming. We're here to talk about, what's been going on in Guidewire security over the last year or so. Did anybody go to one of our previous presentations where we talked about Guidewire security? All right, so primarily we got fresh meat here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about, our strategy. This will be sort of the review for those of you who have been to one of these before. We'll talk about some of the new things that we've been doing around interfacing with our customers, because we know that, you all need things from us in order to be successful from security. And then we'll talk a little bit about the last mile with Mark. We'll talk about software development lifecycle at a high level and a few other things around that too. So should be interesting. We want it to be interactive, so come up with questions. You can put them in the application. If you're using the mobile application, there's like a Q&A functionality in there. You can put in any kind of question you want. I don't know if we'll be able to answer it, but we're going to try our darndest to answer any questions that you come up here. It doesn't have to be Stump the Chump, but we want to make sure that this is a open forum for you all to ask questions, because as much as we're trying to share information with you, this is also an opportunity for us to hear from you and understand things that are important to our customers. So, you've probably seen this like a dozen times today. The essence of the safe harbor slide is like, we may talk about things that exist, we may talk about things that will exist, but make your investment decisions based on what you know about today. So that's where we'll leave that, and then hopefully you'll never have to think about the safe harbor again. All right, so we'll start with some introductions, and I'll have Mark, kick things off.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. I'm the Director of Customer Evangelism at Guidewire. I've been at Guidewire 13 and a half years and love absolutely everything to do with security and at least expressing that information to you. And later I'll be talking to the last mile about development, I guess.
Yeah.
Hey folks, this is Akshay Shetty. I'm the Deputy CISO at Guidewire. Been here for about a year and a half now.
And I'm James Dolph. I'm the CISO at Guidewire. Been here just over 3 years. So I've had enough time to figure out a little bit about the P&C insurance industry, but I'm still learning a lot. So any of you who want to share unique challenges about P&C and security, I'd love to hear about that. So we'll talk a little bit about, if you watched the keynote this morning, there were a lot of references to trust. There were references to why security is important to not just Guidewire and Guidewire's products, but also to you as our customers. I think it's one of the most foundational pieces of interface between us, knowing that the environment that we're all in is aggressive, right? The security environment in the world is not getting any easier. I like to say there's no good neighborhoods on the internet, so we're all sort of in the same threat landscape, and we recognize that. And we recognize that you all are very highly regulated, and who's had a new regulation hit them this year? I'm surprised that half of you didn't raise your hands. But yeah, it feels like there's this constant stream of regulations. A lot of those have security components. Some of them don't. But we think even if we weren't required to do these things for regulatory reasons, we think security is important enough to make sure that it's a first-class citizen, and it's part of the extended value proposition of what you get with Guidewire. So this is the review part where I review our security strategy. So for those of you who've been here before, this is probably something that you've heard before. We think it's really important to be able to build a transparent approach and talk about this in terms of strategy, because we could do a whole bunch of different things. There's a million things you can do in security, but we have to constrain it to some very focused areas if we want to get to the right security outcomes. So we're very focused on security outcomes for our customers and to protect Guidewire, which by extension protects our customers. So the first part is, protecting or building a strong foundation. If you look at the things that happen out in the wild, it's not usually crazy, nation state hackers taking folks down. It's usually related to hygienic things. It's related to things like patching. It's related to things like incident response. It's related to things that are in people's third-party ecosystem. So we have a comprehensive program that's based on NIST standards, among other things, that we apply to our products and our enterprise to make sure that we're doing the very best that we can do to get secure products to our customers, so you have a secure basis to start your implementations from, and that Guidewire, operating your backends in Guidewire Cloud platform, if you're a cloud customer, we're protecting our enterprise, which by extension, again, protects all of you. So we think that this is important to be standards-based. Anybody out here use NIST CSF? Small number of you. If you don't have a roadmap, if you don't know what's next, if you don't know what you're going to do, for the next dollar of investment, NIST security framework is really a great framework for that, and it's really widely adopted across the world, not just in the United States. The other thing is, you heard in the keynote this morning that we're doing 3 releases a year, if you didn't know that already. Part of our ability to do that is integrating security in a way that is agile and fast and helps our developers to get features and functionality to you in a very quick way, but also a very safe way. When, I guess, Mike was talking about it, he had this sort of like balance thing with, I think, was there trust in the middle? I don't know, I'm forgetting, because it was the first time I saw that one.
Secure.
There was like something in the middle, maybe it was Guidewire, and then there's speed, and then there is security. And those things are a balance that we have to maintain. So we built, again, a comprehensive standards-based program to make sure that we can get both security and agility, so we can get you functionality that helps you with your business problems, and you don't have to compromise on security with the Guidewire platform. Again, based on some NIST framework, SSDF, there's also OpenSAM, if any of you are familiar with it, which is a OWASP framework that we use. It just gives us, again, what do we spend our next dollar on? It helps us to determine that. And then the last part, and I'll talk a little bit about those certifications, we want to make sure that both we have the internal process, we have the rigor, but we also have third parties look at us, and I'll talk about what those are in a couple slides. So why is this so important? I mentioned a couple different things, but the macro environment has become really, really aggressive. And we know that ransomware actors, particularly in the last few years, have been going after all kinds of targets, in every sector. And not because they're very interesting targets, but because they're opportunistic. And a lot of times it's a matter of making sure that you're a less attractive target, or that you make yourself a little bit more expensive to attack than the next guy. But it's going to happen out there, and so it's really important that, because this is such a scary environment out on the internet, that we take this seriously. We also recognize, again, that all of you have requirements that you need to meet in order to be successful beyond your business requirements. So again, it's something that I think you all expect, part of the extended value proposition. At the end of the day, our goal is to be a trusted partner to you. So in the case where you think, hey, we're not meeting the mark, or you have questions, reach out. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we facilitate some of that engagement between Guidewire and our customers, which we owe a lot of debt of gratitude to for helping us to build the roadmap that we've built in the past as well, too. And then the last part is there's no finish line. So the things that we're doing today are not going to be good enough in the future. So we have to have, a longer-term vision about how do we make this group of P&C professionals, companies, and Guidewire itself successful. And it's all great if I say those things, but it's really important that someone else says it besides me. So we work with respected assessors for our certifications. We think that these certifications help to represent all of the rigor that we have behind the scenes, all of the capabilities that we apply, and help you to have an understanding of what is this sort of baseline from which you are embarking on your cloud journey with the Guidewire Cloud platform, or when you're implementing your on-premise insurance suite capabilities. So one of them I think that's really important, both I think ISO 27001 and SOC are pretty well known. ISO 27701 is another really important one because it's focused on privacy. So not only is security and compliance important, but privacy is important to us as well, and we think that this is another message that we're sending to all of you, that privacy is, again, a first-class citizen in the same way that security is. So I'm going to move on and have Akshay talk a little bit about how do we approach engagement with our customers and some of the things that we've been up to maybe make it a little bit easier and faster for all of you.
Thank you, James. In this section, I'm going to talk about three things. First one being the view of security from a customer lifecycle journey perspective. The second one being the shared responsibility model. And the third one, I'll talk more about when we get to it, but it's another channel that we've launched for more active collaboration between you folks, our customers, and us, Guidewire. With that, let's wake you folks up a little bit. I'm going to ask you a question. Have you seen a version of this ever in your lifetime? A version of security functions mapped to a customer lifecycle journey ever? Show of hands. You have? Wow. I expected no one to raise their hand, but I've been in this security industry for more than a decade. James has been around for longer than that. We have not seen something like this before. And we figured that it's about time we came up with something like this for Guidewire to make our functions more transparent to you in terms of how we function internally, right? So if you think about the general phases of a customer lifecycle journey, the first step, of course, is awareness, where you are just trying to figure out what products work for your business case. You're just clicking around, scrolling around the internet, maybe trying to find out what works for you. What does Guidewire Security do in that phase? Of course, we have a public ESG report which talks about our approach to security and privacy, so you can go read that. You don't need to be a customer to read that. We also make sure that a lot of our third-party vendor assessment or risk assessment software platforms that assess different vendors on their scores, we maintain our top-tier scores on those platforms. So when you go and look us up, you have the assurance that you need from a security perspective on those platforms. As you move on from awareness into consideration and acquisition, where you are a little more serious about buying something, you are running POCs, you are assessing different vendors and testing us against them. We get to know you a little more face-to-face. So we give you an overview of security at Guidewire, help you understand a lot of things that James just talked about as well. As part of that engagement, we respond to your RFI questionnaires, sometimes hundreds and thousands of them, very diligently. We also make sure that we're part of some contract reviews when you get to that point, and also get into some very specific, detailed conversations if we have some concerns in certain clauses. So that's kind of what we do in that phase. And let's say you've purchased software, Guidewire's product, and you're all good to go. You go into the onboarding phase, which is all about implementation, making sure that you have everything lined up for your success. We have security implementation standards that we published and we maintain on an ongoing basis, which helps you understand how to securely implement your software and maintain it going forward. We also talk about certain use cases where you would be deviating from a reference architecture. You would be implementing something and you want to understand the security risk of those choices that you're going to make, and we are available to you to have those conversations at that point in time as well. After onboarding, you move on to engagement and intention. This is the longest phase of our relationship between Guidewire and our customers, which is also one of the most important, and this is where a lot of our core functions come into play. Product security, making sure that we're going through all security assessment before we ship something out to you. The whole vulnerability management program, pre-production or post-production, pre-release or post-release, to make sure that any identified issue is remediated on time as much as possible. Going through incident response for unforeseen issues that come up, and also running some customer-requested audits on your behalf as well. Once you move on from engagement and intention, the last phase is advocacy. This is where we take a proactive role. You would have heard Christina Colby talk about the security CISO back that we've put in place as well a few months ago. So we talk to like-minded CISOs across our customer base to understand what's happening in the industry, not just about Guidewire. We are a founding member of the CSAS SIG as well, which is part of ITI-SAC, where we are part of the community with other SaaS vendors, where we talk about emerging security trends and threats in the industry and learn more about it. And whatever we learn, we put it out in terms of our blogs that you can see on our website. One example being the shared responsibility model, which is something that I'm going to talk about next. But I would highly encourage you to build something like this for yourself, and maybe ask other vendors to show you what they do from this perspective too. Because I think understanding and making this relatable to you as a customer as to what security functions we perform to make sure that you are in good hands, this is a great way of looking at it. Okay. Does anyone know why we need a shared responsibility model? Do you agree we need it? Yes? I see some head nods. Okay. Why do we need it? My perspective is it helps us control our controllables. So you may feel like I'm in a therapy session. or coaching session where I'm telling you what to do, but that's true, right? What shared responsibility really does, it tells you what your responsibility is versus ours. It provides you more clarity and reduces the amount of confusion with respect to your responsibility, right? Once you do that, it helps you focus your attention across your controllables and helps you assign resources or allocate resources to control them effectively. That's why shared responsibility is important. And to that effect, what does that reference model for shared responsibility look like for Guidewire Cloud as an example, right? So here's a very high-level model reference architecture. At the bottom, you'll see our partner AWS, who's responsible for security of Guidewire Cloud, right? So they provide infrastructure as a service to us, which we consume. They have a shared responsibility model that they publish on their site. We hold them accountable to that. On top of that, you'll see the Guidewire layer, right, which is responsible for security on Guidewire Cloud. There are two pieces to this. There is GWCP, which is the Guidewire Cloud platform, and maybe Insurance Suite as an example, which sits on top of it, which is the application layer. So there's platform as a service with respect to GWCP. There is software as a service with respect to Insurance Suite, and we make sure that we go through the entire security assessment lifecycle before we ship that out to you, as per the next release and the next release and next release, right? And where's your responsibility in here? Guidewire customers are responsible for security using Guidewire Cloud. So once you consume the release, you implement it in your environment, you customize it, you configure it to your business use cases, you integrate it with your downstream systems, that becomes your responsibility to make sure that you go through the whole security assessment lifecycle for the implementation that you have in your environment, right? That's how we speak about and talk about and think about shared responsibility across the entire stack. So what's a good example of this? Earlier this year, we put out further clarity about what shared responsibility looks like for us from a security assessment perspective. In other words, you may also call it penetration testing, as you better know it. But to me, penetration testing is just an example of doing a security assessment, right? There are different ways of doing assessments. You could do code reviews, you could run static scans, dynamic scans. Pen test is just another way or a technique of doing a security assessment to make sure that you have the right amount of assurance built into your product, right? So we describe it and provide more clarity similar to what I already mentioned, right? We are responsible to make sure that security assessments occur prior to every release, and there is minimum risk as much as possible in that release from a security perspective as we can built in. Beyond that, once you consume it, it's your responsibility to make sure that your own environment has the same amount of security assessment diligence built in. What we are also doing to hold our end of the bargain is not just leaving you out and dry there. Let's assume that you run an assessment, you do a pen test. There is a possibility that you may find something that's wrong with a platform, which is a vulnerability in our platform. So we built a PSERT team or a product security incident response team that is available to receive any such vulnerability reports from you. There is an SOP defined on docs.guidewire as well, which would help you go through the process of how to report that to us. Once you report it to us, we'll go through the entire triage lifecycle, make sure that if it's a true positive, we route it to our internal product engineering teams, and also manage any external communication back to you in terms of the status of remediation for it. And then this is the third topic that I was going to talk about. So finally, we've launched our trust and security site. When you go onto guidewire.com, you can look for trust and security, and you'll find the website, which is a one-stop shop for all things security and privacy for you. You can learn about security's approach to Guidewire security at Guidewire with respect to our cloud services. You can also learn about our approach to privacy as well, which is detailed quite a bit in there. You can go and download a lot of the resources that you would need for your own compliance requirement, like SOC reports, PCI reports. All you need to do is have a login into our Guidewire community portal. So all those emails that you send out to us asking for these reports, you don't need to do any of that. You log into the portal, you have self-service downloads available for you to just download those reports at your own will. And lastly, we've centralized all security-related content on docs.guidewire.com. We have a single landing page for anything related to security from a documentation perspective, which was thanks to Mark Savage here, which is also a great segue for me to turn on the baton to him and run through the rest of the slides.
Hey, Akshay, before we do this, how can they get to our trust and security site?
Yeah, go search for it. Guidewire Trust and Security. You'll find it on the internet, and that's it. That's all you need to do.
Google it or Bing it or whatever.
You can Google it, yeah. Yep. Don't Bing it.
Right. All right.
Right,
well,
Mark.
thank you so very much. Well, thank you, Akshay. Here's a recap on our journey so far. James focused on how we build a secure, how we look at security at Guidewire. And Akshay talked about the shared responsibilities and how that all connects. And now for the third year in a row, I get to talk on the last mile in our journey. You are all some of the most risk-savvy companies in the entire world, and you know a thing or two about security and risk. You already have your software development life cycles. You've been quite successful even before you came to Guidewire. You know how to develop software. You know how to make that work. And now we have our shared responsibility model, so you understand your aspect of where you'll have to do different things. But how do you actualize the connection between your software development lifecycle and the shared responsibility model? Well, we took some time to think about it and tried to put together a model that you can think about as you're developing each one of your new features, or you're customizing your applications, or even building your new integrations. And we think this is going to be a great way for you to start thinking about this in the future. Okay, a dramatic introduction here for such a, I don't know, very limited slide, but the devil is in the details. So for some of you, you may have seen in a talk we had before this, Thiru, Ramanan, and myself went through a specific contrived example where we went through each one of the different areas of this model and showed you how you look at them as you're developing each new feature. Now in this particular topic, I'm going to concentrate more on the why and what each one of these different areas are, so you know it from a 50,000-foot level. But first, let's talk about costs. So according to NIST, it's the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and it makes sense. If you find a bug in production, it's gonna cost a lot more to fix it than if it was during your development phase or during your original design phase. Now that makes sense. But what they've come up with a number is it's 30% more effort or cost to fix that later. 30 times. That is 3,000 times the cost. I don't know about you, but I'd like some of that cash in my back pocket. And the other thing too is after you have these security-related issues that you found in production, you've now lost some trust with your clients. And you now have to explain to them why you had these security-related issues. So it's important and imperative to left shift as much of your security thinking in this process right back to the original design phase, and it will cost less as time goes on. So the first phase in the framework is the learn phase. This doesn't have to be connected directly with the development of a new feature. In fact, we think you should be learning all the time, right?
Yeah, it should be continuous.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is the time, too, you really want to reach out to your security team. Because your security team really wants to talk to you. Trust me, they don't want to wait until you throw the code over the fence to them for them to look at it. They would like to get right in there at the beginning to start telling you things that they learned, CVEs that may have been released, and try to keep you on top. They love talking about these sorts of things. You would also want to reach out to look at different sites like ISC2, SANS, and excuse me, the OWASP-related sites. And of course, as we said earlier, I didn't think we'd get it here for connections, but the docs.guidewire.com/security. It is a landing page, again, accessible by Google or Bing, or we shouldn't really say Bing, right? It's not the way it should work. But the fact is, you can find it there. It is a public site. Isn't that scary and awesome? We're going to take security stuff, put it out on the internet, release it publicly for your consumption.
Gosh, Mark, somebody might read it then, huh?
That is awesome. But see, it's a double-edged sword. The cool part is by putting it out there, we see what's there. You can also provide feedback to us to let us know more content that you'd like to help guide you through the process. Now, during the learning phase also, this is when it's a great idea to create a collection of checklists that work for your company. Every company has a different collection of standards and compliance-related things. Maybe you're related to GDPR, or there's a Canadian-related one, I believe, that came out recently, and there's one in California. You may have specific compliance things that you need. So maintaining your own checklist of what works for your company and security-related questions that have come up is a great thing during the learning phase. Then we move into the design phase. So after you're going to develop your particular brand new feature, You, again, gather your security team, your design team, your engineers, and decide what the product is. This is the time you define the definition of done and what you want to do when it comes out of this, what you should be looking for in this. In our last example, we were talking about Thiru's rubber ducky. Again, take a look at that if you get a chance. I believe it's been recorded. So the fact is, whether you want to pull this PII out inside of it, that's something you would define at this particular point in time. And this is when you'd start looking at specific risks that could happen in this. This can be done using a threat model of that particular feature you're trying to implement. And then you start coding. So in the coding phase, this is when we do recommend using agile-related processes and pair programming to ensure that people are keeping an eye on each other's code and learning back on the cycle inside of itself. Performing code reviews to make sure that what you're doing adheres to the guidance that we've provided, or things like the OWASP site, where they have a collection of collateral that you can pull in and follow. And open source libraries. Let's see if I've got it here. Guidewire strongly advises against incorporating extra open source libraries into your implementations. I know, very dramatic, but it's very important. It's not that we don't use third-party libraries. They're great, they're wonderful, they do help development, but there's a cost associated with all third-party libraries you add into your source code. We at Guidewire have a collection of processes where we scan our third-party libraries continuously, looking for CVEs, or common vulnerabilities and exposures that have been introduced, or zero-day related vulnerabilities. And we stay on top of those, triage those, and get them into the product. The moment that you add these third-party libraries into your configurations, the burden's on you, which does make things a little bit challenging, because you need to make sure you maintain it all the time, and it's going to come back to you as we continue through this model. Now we move to the testing phase, and as Akshay said earlier, this is where you look at your security assessments. Penetration testing is one that you talked about. It's just different ways to assess your code, how you define that it's correct. Remember that definition of done at the beginning? This is where you'll look at the things that you've decided to create, whether or not the PII that you're trying to get, Thiru's rubber ducky, whether you want to get that out or they have the ability to potentially pull that. And again, during the testing phase, you've got to scan those third-party libraries that you may have introduced inside of the source code, because things could have changed from the time you developed it to when you're testing it. We then move into the monitoring phase. So you've deployed it, it's in production, so you have application-related logs that I think we use Datadog, if I'm not mistaken, for our stuff.
If you're on GWCP, there's
right.
Datadog. If you're on Classic, we use Sumo. If you're on your on-premise, then it's sort of up to you.
Absolutely.
You may have something we don't know about, right?
Absolutely. And then you also have your authentication logs, where you'll look at whether or not there's anomalous behavior of people connecting into the systems at particular points in times, and you're looking at that collection of logs. And those darn third-party libraries, you gotta keep monitoring those, because things can change all the time. And once you've added into the code, this burden is now on you to start looking at. All right, we're done. We've created this beautiful, wonderful application or functionality or extended things. This is when you want to celebrate as a team. It's always good to celebrate, right? We all love celebrating. But this is when you look at what worked and what didn't work during your development process. Did you have enough materials? Did you have enough collateral? Is there something you think Guidewire should kind of help you with? This is where you'd want to get that information, add it to the checklist that we talked about way at the beginning in the learn phase, and decide whether the things that you had in there worked or didn't work. All right, and this is the whole life cycle that we talked about before. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of absolutely everything you possibly can do, but we do believe there's enough information inside of there to get you thinking about it, to shift your thoughts about security all the way to the left. Talk to your security team, because they really want to talk to you, and your legal team, and your compliance teams.
Your privacy team.
Your privacy teams. They all want to contribute to this, because you're all a team. All right, what's next? So we've gone through quite a journey, haven't we? Of course, you talked about how we build and how we think about security at Guidewire. Akshay grabbed our wonderful shared responsibility model, talking about that, and I talked about a framework in here. And I think that is the last thing we have. I'll pass the baton to you.
All right, so I hope that we have some questions in here. We're going to take a look. If you haven't asked a question, you can also go to one of the folks with the mic in the audience. We're happy to talk about anything security, and if we can answer it, we'll answer it, and if we can't, hopefully we can help you to find the right thing. We do have one question in here. I'll read this one. So how does Guidewire research vulnerabilities in third-party libraries and notify their customers when vulnerabilities are found in the Guidewire out-of-the-box code? And it disappeared. Okay, so Guidewire is part of the way that we build software. We have a secure software development lifecycle. This secure software development lifecycle has a number of activities to both enumerate and scan the libraries that we use, but also orchestrate the fixing internally of these vulnerabilities. As you get new versions of the software, as we put out new patches, those patches contain not only features and functionality, et cetera, but they also contain security updates. If you're on one of our cloud services, like GWCP particularly, you're going to get 3 releases a year. You're also going to get interim releases. All of those also include security updates. So when they were talking about the importance of getting to N-2, one of the really important reasons to do that is we can introduce security patches, but also updated security functionality in the products as well too.
It sounds like we have a
live question.
live
All right.
question.
Yeah, and it relates to the open source libraries. I've noticed with the products, you're requiring us to install things like Node, Python, assorted other products. That seems to violate that principle where you're asking us to go to a website, download software, which creates issues for us internally. I was just wondering what the position is on that.
Is this related to the implementation of the...
Yep, so if I install Hakuba, I've got to go and get Node to make it work.
Sure.
If I use GT Framework, I've got to do
Yeah.
the same thing. If I use Utro, I've got to go and get all this software.
Yeah, and certainly, this is again part of the, and maybe this is an opportunity for us to create some documentation. We should write that one down. But, this is the part of the shared responsibility model, right? We provide guidance on how customers should implement and can implement, but it comes back to this actionability again. So in the case where, let's say we ask you to install Node, hopefully you're installing the latest one. If there are vulnerabilities found in Node on your local system, it's important that you're maintaining the latest versions of those as well too. If we could see that,
there's been a change though, because we didn't used to have to do that. That used to come packaged with the software.
In sort of the IDE that used to get packaged.
Right,
Yeah,
right. So
yeah.
with that, he's talking probably about legacy insurance suite related
We're on
code.
cloud.
The on-premise
Hakuba
version?
Yeah.
No
so
longer includes Node, used to. That was a bit of a surprise when it was released.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing inherently wrong with using technology, right?
Well,
Sorry,
yeah, so I understand that, but we've got internal processes we need to follow to install software.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if we're trying to stay on current versions,
Sure.
and all of a sudden there's a requirement to install an open source library,
that
That's
is a
problematic.
really good point. And I remember when that came out, when they started pulling parts out of our product for that, that was actually a request from our customers. Because the fact is, if we released a specific version inside of our product itself, now we're responsible for ensuring we always package the latest and greatest of that particular software, which also now means that we're monitoring the security of a third-party site for the recommended software in that case. So there's recommended versions they have of each one of the different areas. And part of the reason why they did that also is that you, as a customer, can download that particular version, look at the checksum of the information that you pulled down to make sure that you got the right particular version, and now you know it's correct. The problem we had with some customers, they said, look, we don't care what version you're packaging. You say it's right, but how do we know it's right? So you're right, it's an interesting situation, but...
It's an additional thing to monitor. I would put this in the...
I haven't got to the monitoring bit. I've got to go to security, I've got to go to finance, I've got to go to legal.
Yep.
And I didn't know I had to do that.
Yeah, it's certainly part of the shared responsibility model. So,
That's right.
Yeah. So there was a question on here. We'll move to the next question. Is there a plan to create patches for non-N-2, so older than N-2? It's very, very important for those of you who are on cloud to get yourself to N-2. If you can be N-1, that's even better, because that's where we can provide the most security for you, right? So we don't have an intent, unless there are serious issues to be able to backport those patches, because there's a lot of work that goes into maintaining these previous releases, and we want to make sure that we can narrow that as much as possible so we can focus our efforts on being fast, right? The more releases we have, the more effort that takes. So N-2 is our cutoff. It's also, I think, a pretty reasonable bar once you see how easily the updates go in the later releases here. You'll find that that's a really good value for the security bump that you're getting. All right, any more questions on there? Mark?
Sorry, I was too intrigued listening to your answer to take a look at this. Is there a mechanism available to tag all data elements within the data model definition in core with PII level to act as a source of truth for privilege to support data access? Example, support data masking, explore, integration, access, etc.
I don't know. I think this is probably a good question for our implementation team. So,
Or the product team.
or the product team. Yeah, if it's not, that I think there's a really good candidate to be on the backlog of work to be done, because you could do more automation. Yeah.
Luckily, we have someone here from product.
There is a tag in the data model. This is Jack Reichner. I'm one of our engineering directors for Insurance Suite.
All right.
Obfuscate internal and obfuscate unique. Those are used, I believe, by the GDPR configuration that was introduced in one of the more recent versions of Self-Managed Insurance Suite to determine the type of mechanism to obfuscate that data when you're performing a GDPR action. You could look at the data model by looking at the actual metadata behind it to say, does this property have this particular tag, and then configure as needed for whatever action you're taking. So that's the level of detail that I can provide.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Now we're going to pass all the product questions to you. All right, we have another one?
We do.
I don't see anything on the app. Anyone else in the room?
All
No,
right.
everything was crystal clear.
There we go.
Mike has
You got a
something.
question.
Go ahead, Mike.
On the third-party libraries question,
Yeah.
if we find one that we don't see as part of the product and there might be a common use for it across the board that Guidewire hasn't leveraged, is there a forum to say, hey, can we get this included as part of Guidewire's offering so that customers can start leveraging it and it's included as part of the security review?
So is your question, would we consider bundling some commonly used or supported third-party libraries with the product?
As an example, Apache Camel's used for the integration gateway. There's a lot of third-party add-ons to Camel. If there's some very, like we use Atlas maps for our mapping. How do we get those libraries included so that way we're not adding them in as a customer?
Yeah, so certainly, and I won't speak with the product team. We do have somebody from the product team now that I can hit on. But certainly if it's part of functionality, we would include the libraries that are associated with that and maintain it. So it may be a matter of, there's some common use cases that we haven't yet got in Insurance Suite where it would be better to not even, not just include the library, but actually create a defined function for that functionality. So, helping us to understand the use cases that you have, speaking with your account team, I think that's a really great way to do it, because if we just bundle them, then it feels like a, I don't know, it feels like a compliance thing rather than a, actually solving your problem. So, yeah, any additional? Yeah.
That's all I would add, other than just to...
Yeah, he'll get the mic.
Thank you. Just to reiterate what you said in a slightly different way, if we're just adding those third-party libraries in for the sake of adding them, we're bloating the surface of your potential security vulnerabilities without a clearly defined benefit that you're getting from that library in the form of new functionality. So unless there's something in the core product that specifically warrants adding in an extension like that, probably we're not going to.
That's right.
Yeah, the less we can use in terms of third-party libraries, the better. But certainly we want to continue to increase functionality. So I think that's the best avenue to do that. All right.
So I didn't see any more.
How about folks in the back? You guys are like me when I was in college, sitting in the back, looking and, whatever. Haven't got any spitballs up here, but I'm watching you guys. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll stick around here for about 5 more minutes if you have a question that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, and happy to chat with you folks until they kick us out of here. All right. Thanks a lot, folks.
Thank you.